Today is the 26th of July. Now we come to Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 19. Dvedhavitakka Sutta, two kinds of thought. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, noble sir," they replied. The Blessed One said, "Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty." I stop here for a moment. These, the Noble Eightfold Path, the second factor is Samma Sankappa, right thoughts. And right thoughts consist of thoughts of renunciation or no sensual desire, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So, wrong thoughts or unskillful thoughts are the opposite, thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, the thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me. Similarly, when I considered this leads to my affliction, the affliction of others, etc., then it subsided. And similarly, a thought of cruelty arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of cruelty has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered thus, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So, I'll stop here for a moment. So here, the way the Buddha did away with these wrong thoughts or unskillful thoughts is to consider that you allow it to arise, that it leads to your own affliction, your own suffering, and also causes suffering to others and to both, and also it obstructs wisdom and leads away from Nibbana. So when he realized that it was wrong, it was unskillful thoughts, then it subsided, or he did away with it. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, similarly thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of non-cruelty to cultivate the thought of cruelty, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of cruelty. I stop here for a moment. This paragraph, this passage is extremely important. What we frequently think and ponder upon, that becomes the inclination of our mind, our habit pattern. So we create habit patterns in our mind. Nowadays, scientists talk about what is you call it? No, neuron pathways and all this. So long ago, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha already saw this, that if we continue thinking in a particular way, we form these habit patterns in our mind, and our mind always inclines in that direction. So it's very important that, as the Buddha here says, that if we are practicing the spiritual path, we know that these are unskillful thoughts. We must immediately nip it in the bud. Of course, for most worldly people, if thoughts of sensual desire arise, they like to think more about it. They dream and all these things. So it just strengthens the sensual desire, or ill will, or cruelty. So this is a very important passage, that what we frequently think and ponder upon, that becomes the inclination or habit pattern of our mind. So that's why it's very important to always constantly look into our mind. How are we thinking? Are we thinking skillful thoughts or unskillful thoughts? What kind of habit pattern are we creating in our mind? Okay, to continue. Just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops thickened, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that, with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent and resolute, the thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. As I abided thus diligent, ardent and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me. Similarly, a thought of non-cruelty. I understood thus, this thought of non-ill will or non-cruelty has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, similarly thoughts of non-cruelty, he has abandoned the thought of ill will and cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-ill will and non-cruelty. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of non-cruelty. I'll stop here for a moment. So this is in the converse. If we constantly think skillful thoughts, that becomes our habit pattern, and we frequently think in that direction. So it is a training of the mind that we need to cultivate. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops have been brought inside the villages, the cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So too there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. Tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled. My mind concentrated and unified. Now Buddha refers to quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, I entered upon and abided in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. With the fading away as well of delight, I abided in equanimity and mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. I entered upon and abided in the third jhana, on account of which Noble Ones announced, he has a pleasant abiding, who has equanimity and is mindful. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous experience of joy and grief, I entered upon and abided in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and utter purity of mindfulness and equanimity. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. I recollected my manifold past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 births, many aeons of world contraction, many aeons of world expansion, many aeons of world contraction and expansion. There I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my nutriment, such my experience of pleasure and pain. And passing away from there, I reappeared elsewhere, and there too I was so named, of such a clan, etc. Passing away from there, I reappeared here. Thus with the aspects and particulars, I recollected my manifold past lives. This was the first true knowledge attained by me in the first watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, and I understood how beings pass on according to their actions. Thus with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and I understood how beings pass on according to their actions. This was the second true knowledge attained by me in the second watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. When my concentrated mind was thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, I directed it to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints or asavas. I directly knew as it actually is, this is suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the origin of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is cessation of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. I directly knew as it actually is, these are taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the origin of taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the cessation of taints. I directly knew as it actually is, this is the way leading to the cessation of taints. When I knew and saw thus, my mind was liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. When it was liberated, there came the knowledge it is liberated. I directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This was the third true knowledge attained by me in the third watch of the night. Ignorance was banished and true knowledge arose. Darkness was banished and light arose, as happens in one who abides diligent, ardent, and resolute. So here just a description of how the Buddha attained enlightenment on that night. To continue, suppose monks that in a wooded range there was a great low-lying marsh, near which a large herd of deer lived. Then a man appeared, desiring their ruin, harm and bondage, and he closed off the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he opened up a false path, and he put out a decoy and set up a dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come upon calamity, disaster and loss. But another man came, desiring their good, welfare and protection, and he reopened the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he closed off the false path, and he removed the decoy and destroyed the dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come to growth, increase and fulfillment. Monks, I have given this simile in order to convey a meaning. This is the meaning. The great low-lying marsh is a term for sensual pleasures. The large herd of deer is a term for beings. The man desiring their ruin, harm and bondage is a term for Mara, the evil one. The false path is a term for the wrong eightfold path, that is wrong view, wrong intention or wrong thoughts, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness and wrong concentration. The decoy is a term for delight and lust. The dummy is a term for ignorance. The man desiring their good, welfare and protection is a term for the Tathagata, Arahant, Sammasambuddha. The safe and good path that led to the happiness is a term for the noble eightfold path. That is, right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness and right concentration. So monks, the safe and good path that leads to happiness has been reopened by me. The wrong path has been closed off. The dummy destroyed, the decoy removed. What should be done for disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and has compassion for them? That I have done for you, monks. There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is our instruction to you. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So this last part about the Mara trying to lead us the wrong path. Unfortunately, even nowadays, there are some monks, they teach the Dhamma, but unfortunately they teach the wrong Dhamma. So they are also like Mara, leading us the wrong way. Sometimes the easy way, sometimes the way that people like because it's easier to practice. So we have to be extremely careful. So to follow the right way, our teacher is always the Buddha. And now that he has entered Nibbana, he says that we should always refer to his suttas, suttas like this. Going back to the earlier part, where what a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind, the habit pattern. It brings to my mind several years ago, one of our Buddhist devotees told me that his auntie had a very nasty temperament, a very nasty temper and a very unpleasant character, always angry and had a lot of hatred, even for her own relatives and all these things. So when she died at an old age, 2 days before she died, 2 long teeth came out, Dracula's teeth came out of her mouth. The children were shocked, and this man who told me, he also saw it himself. So they tried to close the mouth, but they could not hide the teeth. But 2 days later, when she passed away, the 2 teeth disappeared. It just proves that 2 days before she died, she already turned into that type of ghost, that fierce type of ghost with the 2 teeth. So it's very simple. I mean, if you understand this sutta, you know why? Because she has always been having that kind of character, so much hatred and anger and all that. So she has made herself into that kind of a being, even with the human body. So that's why it's very important that we cultivate skillful thoughts. There are a lot of things in this world that people don't understand. For example, like indulging in sensual pleasures, indulging in food and all that. We think is harmless, but actually in the suttas, you find that people who indulge in all these things, they go to woeful places of rebirth. Why? Because it is based, this type of thoughts, this type of actions are based like animals or ghosts and all this. So we debase ourselves by this type of actions. So because we have certain tendencies, just like the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There are two parts of us: the good part, the bad part, the animal part, and the angelic part. So it's up to us which one we want to choose. If we are careless, we just allow ourselves to follow our base tendencies, then we make ourselves into this type of creature, just like this woman. So when we are reborn to a woeful plane, then only we know why. So in the suttas, the Buddha says, when a being goes into hell, then he will realize what actions he did that make him fall into hell. That time he realized it was a big mistake. Nobody taught him. Those actions will bring him to hell, or even to the ghost realm.